Hi, welcome back again. This next session is the panel on Alzheimer's case study, connecting caregivers, patients, and clinical trials. So it's a wonderful add-on and build to the talk that we just heard from John Dwyer. The moderator is Robin Strongen. She's the founder of Disruptive Women in Healthcare. She's a role model for all of us who have tried to do anything disruptive in healthcare. We're thrilled to have her moderating this panel, and she will introduce our very esteemed group of people. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. By a show of hands, for those of you who are here, how many of you have been in or are currently in a clinical trial? Okay. So obviously, we've just heard from Dwyer, who shared with us how technology is assisting with clinical trial recruitment redesign. And we are going to key off of what John was talking about and look specifically at how we deploy technology and tools specifically to study people in place where the real action is. Used thoughtfully, these tools have the power to transform people from research subjects into research participants. And to do that, there is this urgency, and John was describing that earlier. The first person to be cured, quote unquote, with Alzheimer's is going to be somebody who was in a clinical trial. But how do we indeed encourage people to understand the importance, the significance of engaging, of participating, and knowing when it is time to get interested in, to take part in, and to participate? To help us understand this and to learn about the new tools that are available to do just that, we have three panelists with us today. I'd like to first introduce Meryl Comer, who, by the way, at 3:45 today will be signing her book, which you'll learn more about in just a minute. Meryl has been an at-home caregiver for over 20 years now, taking care of her husband, who has early onset Alzheimer's disease. She's also currently president and CEO of the Jeffrey Bean Foundation Alzheimer's Initiative. She formed the 21st Century Brain Trust, which is a nonprofit partnership to advance mobile health technology and brain health. And she serves as the co-PI for a PCORI, it's called the ADPCPRN, Alzheimer's Disease Patient Caregiver Network. I want to introduce Meryl in a very special way. If you'll take a look at the screen, we're going to let some visuals speak for Meryl's story. Meryl?
I call myself a POA. I'm a prisoner of Alzheimer's. I'm an extension of his disease. I feel compelled to speak out for both victims, because they have no voice, and for caregivers who are worn out. This will be our epidemic. This is the dark side of longevity. I just saw it young. So it's like being witness to the future. I'm afraid for all of us. So my wish for Harvey is that I just don't wear out or give up, or there's an episode where I can't manage it somehow. To me, it's time for a generation to say, unacceptable. This is not the way we want to end our lives.
Thank you. Well, now you know I'm a noisy advocate. What you also don't know is that as a former reporter, I vowed never to write a book because I had interviewed too many people with nothing to say. So that was my pledge to myself, and as an advocate, I felt compelled to write. For many of you, you've been introducing yourselves to new people. I can only describe the disease to you. Imagine introducing yourself to someone 20 times a day, and now imagine that she gave you your name. The person that you loved, mother, father, is disappearing in the room without ever leaving it. And that is the pain of Alzheimer's disease, a slow, progressive, fatal disease. Advocacy has, quite frankly, saved my life. Take a look at this statistic. More people now cite Alzheimer's as the scariest health condition of later life, more than cancer, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, and arthritis combined. Behind that statistic is something even more telling. It's not just those of us who are 65 and older, it's our kids. They are watching us take care of our parents, and they see their futures, and they are as terrified as we are. Your risk for Alzheimer's increases, concussion from sports, obesity, depression, diabetes, postmenopausal, all of these accelerate your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Now, for those of you who design products, this is a disease where if you don't design a product that's somewhat adaptive, your product will never make it in the marketplace. And I'm going to show you how the brain unravels with the disease because it is very idiosyncratic to the personality, and you figure out where you fit in that conversation because it's always in the detail of a disease, especially a disease of the brain, where you're trying to find your place.
What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as 2 abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination, and in the very last stage, it destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing.
It destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing. It is a slow, progressive disease, and you watch a loved one dissolve right before your eyes. This is also the biggest women's issue since breast cancer. We outlive men statistically, are more prone to get it, and they're just beginning to look at the sex-based differences, and we are 2/3 the caregivers. The diagnostics are getting better. You see many high-profile individuals coming out. They have been forced out. Smart people hide out for a long time in this disease. Glenn Campbell lost his way on stage, Pat Summitt. Look at the institutions and look at how the infrastructure around them supports them. Huge issues for the legal field with judges as well. Look at this. If you're diagnosed with cancer, 9 times out of 10, your doctor is going to tell you. If you have Alzheimer's disease, 55% of the physicians keep the diagnosis to themselves, which means this is unacceptable for the future. We need to know, and it's time to end the paternalism. We must engage the physician communities. Let us decide how we manage the information. 20 years a caregiver. My husband was chief of HEMONC at NIH. At 57, got early onset, misdiagnosed for 5 years, was then deemed too dangerous to come home. No one would take him. Not at $100,000 private pay, and it's all private pay. I left my career, which many women are forced to do, to take care of him, to fix the problem, and 20 years later, I am still taking care of him at home. I went home and made it up as I went along, so I have lived inside this disease. From that experience and from writing the book, I lived forward to survive. When I wrote the book, I looked back, and 20 years later, nothing had changed. The average age of the caregiver is 48 years of age, taking care of their parents, taking care of their kids. No disease-modifying therapy. And the reason I showed you the video, you see the complexity of the human brain and how hard it is to find a disease-modifying therapy. And it bothered me for the next generation of women. The feminist in me came out and said, that's unacceptable. 20 years later, we have to do something. Now, I had been very candid in the book. In fact, for those of you who have written books, when I walked on stage, I felt naked, and at my age, not a good idea. But the point was, we had to have an honest conversation about this disease at this point in time. So how could I distract? How could I advance the conversation? I had survived by living digitally. I was wired because I was isolated with my husband alone for so many years. So I said, well, let's look at the impact of caregiving, because we forget who we are. It's the intensity of care over years. It is assumptive that we're fine. The government has no plan B. 75% of long-term care is informal, family members. What happens if we go down? What happens to the patient? So I went online and I searched for a technology that would really have the energy, that respected a public investment, and I went to DARPA. And I went to the front lines of Iran and Iraq and looked for a technology that was used to pull troops back. We migrated it, because I'm a funder, a donor foundation, we migrated it to the dementia space. In the first time out, we went virtual. We were validating the caregiver, you matter, and what we found, we had over 1,000 signups in 12 weeks, and you saw the attrition rate and the challenge that John presented of trying to get people engaged. But virtually, they were ready with us, but what we found should be no surprise. 57% of us were operating at less than 50% cognitive vitality against normative data. We described ourselves as stressed but okay, and that gave us the clue that we had to migrate the research, part of the research, back to the bedside, because clinics are artificial. By the bedside is where the action is. And all of a sudden, if the average caregiver is 48, if the baby boomer is the caregiver of their parent, technology is seamless in our lives. We are connected. Use us as data collectors. So we started with the caregiver, track the caregiver, look at where the caregiver is getting sick across disease progression. That's where the support services. Let them track the data in between. What does that look like? So we are now on round 2 of the Healthy Brain Study. We put out a call to all caregivers. Come join us, trust us, we're with you. Know your brain, protect your brain. And we are now in phase 2 of a study tracking people longitudinally, and we are adding a virtual intervention for depression. Texting right now has been shown in other areas in terms of psychiatric disease to decrease the readmissions into psychiatric in-hospital clinics by 46% using texting. So that whole space now is wide open. You don't have to go anywhere. You can stay connected, and it's very valuable. Now, again, John looked at the problem of R&D, but again, it's in that reducing the cycle time in the study and the recruitment. So again, we created a platform that we call Galaxy, and it's a showcase for all your technologies and the beta testing that will be going on around us. The idea was to get a lot of organizations together, showcase them, be ready for research. What does that look like?
24/7 battle, if you choose to fight it. 60% of my short-term memory is gone regularly in 30 seconds. I don't often recognize where I am in familiar places. See people that I've known all my life that I don't recognize.
I'm B. Smith, and I suffer from Alzheimer's disease.
What does that look like? A virtual research-ready network. We smart track our brain vitals. A brain vital, what about that? Share our data. We are on a mission. It is not just my Apple Watch, which is reminding me to stand up right now.
People assume that Alzheimer's is the end stage. Someone in a nursing home, in a bed who can't speak. It is the end stage, but the beginning is where I am in early onset.
Minorities are underrepresented in research, so we may not be getting the best possible care.
When you look at your prized possession, which is my mind, was my best friend, and now I don't know if there's any chance for reconciliation.
Brain span, lifespan, that's a longevity conversation.
I'm not going to give to it. I'm going to fight.
This is the platform. We are now aggregating people where they live. We are looking at closed Facebook community support groups. We are your beta testers. We are ready, but bring us in early in the design. Let us help you. We are an accelerant to your product design, and we will connect you with all the experts in our space. We are on a mission. We are desperate for something going on, and that's why I'm this AG cheerleader for 2 of the technologies you're about to hear from, because alone they were very powerful and important in our space, but what happens when you begin to connect them in terms of recruitment? So I'm going to turn it back to Robin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Meryl. So you can see the power behind somebody who truly is on a mission. And Meryl, I don't know what the space would be like if you weren't in it, to be very honest. The Galaxy platform, as Meryl said, really is an online platform to be able to showcase some of the promising tools and technologies that are out there for people living with Alzheimer's, for researchers, for caregivers, and for what we call the worried well. As Meryl mentioned, in her role with Jeffrey Bean, she has funded Rubric and the integration with Antidote, 2 of the technologies that were launched as an integration actually today. And it is my pleasure to introduce first Nate O'Keefe, one of the co-founders of Rubric, and then Tyler, whose name I always mess up, Trueg, who is clinical director at Antidote, formerly known as Trial Reach. What I'd like to do is ask Nate to come up first and talk about Rubric, and he will be followed by Tyler to talk about Antidote. But again, both of these tools can be accessed separately, but also through Galaxy, and we'd love for you to go to galaxybraintrust.org and take a look at all of the videos that you saw here and the two technologies, see how they work together, and we'll have some time at the end for questions. Let me now turn the podium over to Nate.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Meryl and Robin, for the kind introduction and the invitation to be part of this panel today. We are honored to be here and excited to see some enthusiasm around this topic. Again, my name is Nate O'Keefe. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Rubric. At Rubric, we build consumer-facing online tools that help people make these really difficult health and care decisions, primarily around issues related to getting older and caregiving. We're here today to talk about this challenge of how do you take someone from these early moments of observation and concern, a repeated story, a lost set of car keys, a missed appointment, 1,000 steps down the path of thinking, well, maybe it's time to think about being part of a clinical trial or some other form of clinical research. To illustrate this challenge, I actually have a question for you all here today that I promise is relevant. How many of you have ever had to deal with a minor household plumbing issue? So show of hands, a dripping faucet, a slow drain, a running toilet. Okay, most of us. How many of you have ever Googled a minor household plumbing issue? Okay, again, most of us. Well, imagine if you had gone to Google, you typed in dripping faucet, and all of a sudden you were bombarded with ads from companies that wanted to replace all the plumbing in your house and completely remodel your kitchen. You might say, well, wait a second, what if it's just a 50-cent gasket? I can just replace that up in the faucet. Or maybe I can go to Home Depot and I can buy a new faucet. That'll take care of this problem. Or, the drip really is not all that bad. Maybe I can live with this for a couple months or even years. And this is kind of what's happening in Alzheimer's trial recruitment today, is we're trying to reach people who are at the very beginning of this process. They're noticing changes, but they have very little context for what they mean, how serious they are, or what they might mean in the future. And we're asking them to consider what seems to them to be a very extreme intervention, participating in a clinical trial for an experimental medication. It's no wonder we're having some trouble recruiting and reaching people, engaging people around this subject. We're excited today to be part of this partnership that has launched today to see if we can make a difference here. I wanted to share a little bit of the backstory of Rubric. I'm not really slide heavy today. This was actually supposed to go up about a minute ago. So Rubric is my second startup. In 2006, I co-founded an early mobile healthcare app company. We were called Modality. Our claim to fame was we had 4 of the first 500 apps in the App Store when it launched way back in June of 2008. So at one point, we could lay claim to nearly 1% of the entire App Store catalog, a feat that would last for about 36 hours. We were acquired by a company called Hippocrates, a West Coast mobile medical app company. Physicians may be aware of it. I worked at Hippocrates for about 2.5 years in product management until they were acquired by Athena Health, of course, right across the river here in Watertown. My co-founder, Judy Conaway, who's here today, and I started Rubric after these separate, significant care experiences at opposite ends of the age spectrum. So in 2011, my third child was born a 26-week preemie, super early. We got lucky. He's doing really well. And Judy's been a family caregiver for her mother and her in-laws for more than 17 years. Our shared experience was just how difficult it is to become informed online when you're in a crisis. I think we're all kind of used to this familiar experience now where you notice a change. You go to Google, you start kind of guessing at keywords and then sifting through the results, looking for any tidbit of information that feels like it's relevant to what feels like a very unique situation. As a digital product person, I found this to be an incredibly frustrating experience, this notion that you first have to become an expert at online research before you can become an informed decision maker struck me as both ridiculous but also solvable. And that became the kernel of Rubric, this idea that if Google or WebMD or some other platform had just asked me a few questions about my situation, it should be able to bring back a much more curated set of tools, content, information, resources sort of structured around an informed decision-making process. And so that's what we built. The first tool we released is called Is It Still Safe to Drive? Classic gateway caregiving issue. We followed on that with Is It Time to Get Help? In beta testing right now is a tool called Are These Memory and Thinking Issues Serious? Essentially, is what we're seeing in dementia. These all follow an assessment-driven approach. We typically ask 15 to 25 questions. It sounds like a lot. It's not when people are engaged around this issue. And then we synthesize your responses into what we call a decision dashboard, which typically has a couple of components. Primarily, there's a score. It might be a fit score. It might be a concern score, but everybody likes to get a number. And for a lot of people in these situations, this is the first time they've gotten a baseline for what has felt like a very amorphous set of concerns and observations. It gives them something to say, okay, well, this is where I am, moderate concern or low concern or a good fit, something that they can begin to hang on to. We deliver some recommendations based along that, and then we give you this first-person report that says, this is my situation, and a summary of everything you've shared that you can share with other family members, share with care providers, share with a clinician. I'll show a couple of screens from a tool in just a moment. You're probably wondering, does this actually work? I have one more question for you all today. Raise your hands if you have ever in your lives clicked on a random Google ad, gone to a completely unknown brand, answered 24 personal questions, and then opted in to share not only your results but also your contact information. I can wait. We were blown away to see that 10% of our clicks were doing exactly that. 17% are completing the assessments. More than half of them are opting in to share their information. That's about 5 times higher than our best projections for what we thought we were going to see when we launched these tools. There's something about this approach, this model of engaging people around assessments that is applicable not just here, but I think everybody should be threading assessments into the work they're doing. One other thing we noticed with Is It Time to Get Help, this tool, is that 90% of the people going through it were noting issues consistent with cognitive decline. Yet only 10% were indicating that they had a diagnosis. And so that, for us, highlighted this unique ability to reach and engage people in exactly this life phase that we're talking about. They're noticing changes, they're burning up the internet trying to find some context for it, but they still may be years away from actually engaging with their care provider. As we've talked about, this is a prime time to try and engage people around, is clinical research a good idea for us? So that led us to Merrill, to this group here that we've been delighted to be working with for the past 9 months. There are 2 components to the program that Rubric is contributing to here. One is this widening of the funnel. It's using these tools. Is it still safe to drive? Is it time to get help? Is what we're seeing dementia? To kind of catch people in their moment of concern and offer them the opportunity to say, hey, maybe I should be thinking about clinical research. That gets people halfway there. What we found is that when they get to that halfway point, clinical research, a clinical trial is still opaque and kind of scary. So we said, well, I think we need another solution here to address this, and so we built a new tool called Is Clinical Research Right for Us? So this is a little bit further down the funnel, and this is still an assessment-driven approach. I want to share just a couple of screens here. This is not a live demo, just to give you a taste of it. This is the landing page, that central question around is clinical research right for us, front and center. The right-hand side of the screen is around expectation management. This is only going to take you 3 or 4 minutes. You'll understand you're fit for research. You'll learn more about the process. You can get connected to studies and learn what is a registry. This is an assessment-driven approach. First question is a personalizing question. Who are you concerned about? You can select mom or dad, a spouse. You can select other person if you don't want to say. You can say myself. This personalizes the rest of the assessment. This is an example question around dispositional fit. So there are a lot of reasons you can not feel ready for a clinical trial. One might be your disposition is not the right disposition. So this question is around, is your mom generally comfortable talking to doctors and nurses and filling out paperwork? Yes, she is. Not really. She often needs help. Not at all. She avoids it when possible. And over on the right-hand side, you can see we can introduce some context around this, around the process of informed consent. So a question like this serves two purposes. It informs people around a particular aspect of clinical research, informed consent, but it also gives the person responding a chance to say, I do have some anxieties around this, and that's maybe one of the reasons I haven't thought about it before. I'm not comfortable talking with my provider. And when they opt to share this, then it creates a dialogue that was not there before. Another example question around another opaque part of clinical research, a placebo. What's that? Sugar pill. Would I be okay with this? I don't know. And then another question around logistical fit. A lot of studies, of course, require you to have a study partner who can accompany you and support you in the process. Is there a family member or friend who can be a study partner and help your mom if needed? Well, yes, I have someone in mind. Maybe, I think there are some people that could help. I'm not sure, I'll have to think about it. There's not a hard no here, because a hard no is not productive for anybody. But if you can say, I'm not sure, I'll have to think about it, that's a signal to whoever you're talking to that this might be a person where we need to offer a little bit of additional support at all stages of the process. So we synthesize your results into what we call your decision dashboard. Your result. You're a great fit. You could be a good fit, you could be a limited fit. You're never a horrible fit, you're never a perfect fit, but this is meant to be engaging and motivating. What does that mean? Well, based on what you told us, it sounds like your mom is a great candidate for clinical research. She's open-minded about her options, and she has flexibility with how and when she participates. Here's what you can do. At the bottom, we summarize your situation, so you now have this record of the things that someone who's talking to you about clinical research is going to care about. It's going to be important for matching a person to a study. And then on the right-hand side, well, what can you do about that? Find a register your online study. These are easy things you can do from home. Anybody can do them. Learn about clinical research. Talk with your doctor. What's that process like? Understand the pros and cons. There are some of both. Maintain healthy habits. Plan for the future. Second down on that list is find a clinical trial, which is a jungle of a process. We don't solve the problem of finding a clinical trial. We take you just about this far. This is what you can expect when you start to search, but you need people like Tyler from Antidote to actually help you navigate that part of the landscape. So with that, I'll introduce Tyler. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nate. My name is Tyler Truitt, and I'm the clinical director of Antidote. So excited to be a part of Galaxy and to be working with great partners such as Rubric. Robin mentioned when we started that our name has changed. I want to give a little bit of background on that. Many of you may know us as TrialReach, and historically we've been a recruitment company. So we work with clinical trial sponsors. We take your one trial. We will work with different patient advocacy groups, other organizations to try to match patients to your one trial. And that's been going really well, but we wanted to be a little bit bigger than that. We saw a huge opportunity in the market to connect patients to research in a much different way. And what kind of really started it for us is we were really frustrated at some other great products that are in the market. An example would be Kayak. So if I can go to any one airline, I can search for a flight, that's great. But there are sites where I can search for all flights at any moment with price changes, and it's an amazing piece of technology. And it was really frustrating for us because we were unable to have something similar to that for clinical research, which seems like it'd be a really helpful thing. So what we did is we went to go a little bit bigger than what we were aspiring to be for TrialReach, and we changed it to something like this. So Antidote is accelerating the breakthroughs of new treatments by bridging the gap between medical research and the people who need them. So put a different way, we're trying to find a way to get all patients access to all available trials. And it turns out that's a really hard problem. If you have ever gone on clinicaltrials.gov as an example, you will find that you can go and answer maybe a couple questions. There's some advanced filtering, but ultimately you're going to have a lot you have to sift through. And I actually just checked earlier today, and there are 207 Alzheimer's trials. Now, the problem that Meryl had mentioned earlier is that we're not even entirely sure if everyone's understanding that research is an option. So if we don't know it's an option, there's 207 trials right now available for research. How are we going to get through this? So Nate with Rubric is really getting us into a great opportunity for understanding when is the right time for research, but what happens then? So thank you for that comment on that. We're taking the next step, and we've been spending quite a bit of time. So this has been a product that I'm about to show you that's been in development for almost 2 years now. It's taken a lot of time, and the reason is it's really difficult for a couple things. One, the data available for clinical trials is really messy, and we have put a lot of care and effort into fixing that. And the other part is putting it in the context of the patient is not a simple challenge. So we can organize the data. We have a great engineering team that's able to organize all the information and make some really interesting technology. But if patients don't understand and don't know how to use it, how do we tackle that? So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we're tackling this, and this is the technology that Meryl had mentioned as part of Galaxy, and we call it Antidote Match. This is the most advanced, patient-friendly clinical trial search tool available. We use a blend of natural language processing, machine learning, some artificial intelligence to help dynamically generate the next question of going through all of the different trials of what's the next most relevant question to figure out the trial for you. So we do this by taking all of that eligibility from clinicaltrials.gov, which is in a free text format. If you're familiar with how to deal with free text, it's really exciting and very complicated. In fact, it's impossible. So what we've done is we've structured the eligibility criteria, and our goal is for all U.S. trials. Now, for this, we're talking about Alzheimer's, and we have that available today on our website, on Galaxy, on Rubric, on a lot of other partners. And we wanted this to be something that was approachable. We wanted this to be easy to use, accessible where you are. So great if you come to our website, but we want it to be where all the patients were. They're actively right now. And so that's where our Connect, our partner network, comes in. So I'd like to show you a little bit about this product here. So this is an example. This is just our website, but you'll notice that the player part, the widget below, is the same thing that you saw on Rubric, on Galaxy, and this is available. We wanted to give the technology away for free. Our goal is to match patients to trials, to allow you to access this research in a way that's never been done before, and we get it into as many hands as we can. So once you do that, it starts very simply. What's the next thing I want to ask you that's going to help you figure out the trial that you should be considering? And in this case, you can say, let's take a 55-year-old male, and that already went through Rubric and decided that this was an opportunity for myself. And pick a distance, I pick a location, and we dive right in. So do you currently have Alzheimer's disease? Now, the data behind this is incredibly complicated, that we have to take the eligibility criteria from every single trial for Alzheimer's. We have to do a process called normalization to make it all talk to each other. So if I say I have Alzheimer's disease, do I have to mention that again for the next trial, or the next trial, or the next trial? And the problem is that was our old process, and a process you see in a lot of places today. I can find a single trial and answer 10 questions, and it will tell me if I'm potentially eligible or if I should consider it. But what about 207? So keep that number in mind. And these are screenshots. It's not a live demo. Happy to show individuals later. But these were taken from the live website. So I answer a single question, and now I'm at 29. So automatically, I filtered through a lot of noise. And it's not necessarily that those aren't good trials. They're just trials that I'm not eligible for. And so we really, time is of the essence, and we really want to make sure that people can fine-tune their search and to really find the trial that's right for them. So then we'll dive deeper. So we've gone from some of the higher-level questions of disease, are you male, female, and this is something that's not ever been done, that we can go into individual drug questions, lab questions, and there are somewhat of over 4,000 available questions of all the eligibility criteria. It's an insane number, and it grows every single day. We have a huge, amazing team of medical annotators, an army of them, rather, that's going through all of this data, and probably a number of trials have already been structured while I'm talking about this. But once you're done answering the questions, you go right into the results. Now, I can filter through all these results. You scan through, gives a little bit of information on how far is this? Is it enrolling, which it should be? What type is this? Is this an interventional trial? Am I going to receive a drug potentially? Or is this a registry? We allow the patient to make that decision on their own, for them to decide what type of trial they should be interested in. Our job is to get all this information out there for you to decide. So once you're in, you get to a study page. Now, this is an interesting example here on this study page. This is one that we pull. All of our data comes from clinicaltrials.gov, so we use the registry as a backbone. We have special data for the eligibility criteria that help you navigate it. But when you get to the study page, we still have to show you what is this trial about. And you'll look at this description, and the first thing I notice is that this isn't really built for patients. This is really to showcase just a good description of a trial. I come from a scientific background. It sounds like a scientific description. And what we've also developed is we're partnering with a number of clinical trial sponsors, from big pharma down to academic centers, small biotechs, anyone who sponsors a clinical trial. We allow for them, through a product called Antidote Bridge, to come into our platform and to add information and make it a little bit easier to understand for patients. But more importantly, add information that's not in the registry as it is. So this isn't an example of it, but you can see this is some basic information, trial summary. You can find all this on clinicaltrials.gov. But imagine if, in going through different questions, I can find out what procedures are going to be done. Am I going to be able to take this drug after the study's over? Is there financial compensation? I have to leave work for this. Is there an overnight visit? How long is this going to take? These aren't secret questions. They're not proprietary, but they're incredibly important. And patients have been asking for this, so we work with sponsors directly to allow them to upload this and put it on their trials. And this information will be available in Match as well. So if you've updated your study in Bridge, it showed right there in Match. And finally, if this is the trial for me and I really want to learn more, we connect you to the site directly. So this is made available through contact information from the registry or extra contact information that you have provided us. And it's as simple as any other web app. So we've gone from this crazy complicated, I love this term, jungle of data for clinical trials, and make it into something where I can pull out a phone, I can look at my computer, I can answer a few questions, I compare one trial to the next, see if it's going to fit into my life, and even go down, put in my name, email, number, push send, and that's it. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions for Meryl, Nate, or Tyler, just shout it out, because it's really hard to see. And I know there are people with microphones. Anybody? Meryl, do you want to say something if people do have tools or technologies that they're working on that they might be interested in Galaxy as a platform? What's the best way to reach you or talk to you about that?
Yes. I just want to make one point. When you have a disease with stigma attached and you go virtual and online, you have bypassed stigma and ageism and opened a doorway and a conversation with people who you cannot touch otherwise or who are adverse to conversations. That is the power of Rubric. We view Galaxy as a showcase and a platform, and we are an aggregator for you. We were an aggregator. How long would it take any of the startups in this room to get an appointment at NIA to be in front of one of the directors or the head who engaged in helping to beta test their product? Because we are the intermediary. We are a desperate patient population. We have our pulse on the subject experts. So how long does it typically take you, Nate, to actually design a product, and what were we as an accelerant for you?
Sure. So we rely. We have some in-house subject matter expertise. We have an occupational therapist on our team who's very good at honing in on the key things we need to get to in an assessment. But we rely on outside subject matter expertise for areas where we don't have that built in on the team. As part of this program, we, as Meryl mentioned, I think we put forth our initial proposal for the question set in July, and within a week we had feedback from the NIA, from Banner, from UCSF, from Mayo, from Cleveland, and a host of other folks that if we were trying to seek that on our own, we'd be knocking on a lot of doors and getting a lot of unreturned emails. And so part of it is an accelerant in speed. I think that bought us easily a month in launch time, but certainly inarguably an accelerant in quality. I mean, having all those folks weigh in, sometimes with consistent opinions, sometimes with varying opinions, really allows us to shape what is the right product to get out there first. So what you see there today already reflects feedback from some of the leading subject matter experts in all this space.
And I want to thank them both because they didn't treat us like a nuisance, which many do, quite frankly, because in the beta testing mode, we also engage with people who are living with Alzheimer's because the diagnostics are getting better in our space. We have to respect those who are in the early stages of MCI. And in fact, that informed both of your products. Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, one huge component for us, hopefully you can hear me, one big component for us was not so much about the technology, but Meryl was really helpful in helping us put it into the mindset of what type of patient is using this. So we work with a variety of different conditions well beyond Alzheimer's, and we try to have a single product that can serve as many people as possible, which is quite a challenge. So we spent quite a bit of time and not just like, okay, great, the interface looks good, it's pretty simple, I can move through it, but the phrasing on that question, that's not really how I would do it. That's a really sensitive topic. And that was huge feedback in the iterative testing. So I would actually argue, thank you for being patient with us on going back and forth with all the different changes. But it's been a really great experience.
So come our way.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think our time is just about up. So if you'd like
Can I ask a question?
Oh, beg your pardon, please.
Here, this side.
Okay.
Okay.
There you are.
All right. Yeah, so we actually, one of the 4 finalists this afternoon going to be pitching for the 50+ Fit Mind Challenge. And my company is called Dance for Healing. There's a research published in 2003 funded by National Institute of Aging, review out of walking, biking, running, golf, tennis, dancing, and then daily activity like reading, writing, solving puzzles. Dancing turns out to be the only physical activity shows the result reducing dementia and the highest by 76%. And so we would love to able to set up a clinical trial, potentially collaborating with you guys. Part of the question, because we actually currently working with Stanford Integrative Medicine and the Geriatric Education Center to set up a trial. This first one, we start with cancer patients, and part of the reason is myself as a cancer survivor, but also the Alzheimer's. My understanding is difficult to track, how do you validate like before and after intervention? One question is like, have you guys working with any company who does these kind of physical activity tracking in a live video platform, not just in person, actually enable this for patients to do it at home, and then, how do we able to structure that? Because it would be really cool if we could validate this previous research.
Well, absolutely. Let's take that offline. The notion that the area that you're studying, my husband maintained his brain. He was a long-distance runner, had over 200 published papers, spoke 4 languages, and it just didn't matter. So all of these are risk-modifying strategies, which we do support in the prevention space. So we're happy to talk to you.
I can't see, but is that you, Amy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Any other questions?
Robin, I think that there are some questions in the back, but we are out of time, so I wonder if people could approach you over on the side during the...
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if you would join me in thanking our panel.